Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something really fascinating, an ancient system of prediction from India called Nadi astrology. Now, what's so incredible about it is how it proposes to understand your entire life's path in a remarkably simple way. It all boils down to just two planets.
So let's just start with that big central question. What if I told you that your whole life story, who you are, what you end up doing, and when all the big stuff happens, could be mapped out using only two planets? Well, according to Nadi astrology, the answer is a resounding yes. And those two planets are Jupiter and Saturn. Let's dig into how that even works.
All right, first up, let's meet our main character, the planet Jupiter. Now, in a lot of astrology, Jupiter is seen as, the big, happy benefactor. But in the Bhrigu Nadi tradition, its role is way more fundamental than that.
Okay, so this is where Nadi astrology really flips the script. For a second, just forget everything you know about a traditional rising sign or ascendant. In this system, Jupiter is the ascendant. It represents what's called the jiva, which is basically the life force of a person. Think of it as the absolute core of your being. It's the "you are here" pin that marks the starting point for your entire life map.
So, whichever zodiac sign Jupiter was in when you were born, that sets the stage for your whole personality. Let's say your Jupiter is in Leo. The system would point to a natural sense of dignity, a knack for leadership. But if it's in Virgo, that suggests a much more analytical, scholarly, service-driven person. And if it's in its own sign, Pisces, you're looking at someone with deep compassion and a spiritual side. See? That placement is your fundamental starting point.
Now, let's bring in our second key player, Saturn. And if Jupiter is the who you are, then Saturn is all about the what you do. It's the planet of action, your career, and your destiny. It's the karmic taskmaster.
In this system, Saturn is seen as this great karmic engine. And that's not just about, challenges and hard lessons. It really represents the actions you are meant to take in this life. It literally governs the path you're going to walk, especially when it comes to your profession and your life's big work.
So, you might be wondering, how does Nadi get so specific about a career? Well, it breaks it down into this really elegant three-step process. First, Saturn's sign tells you the general field of work. Then, any other planets that are right there with Saturn can tell us about your position in the hierarchy. And third, the planets that Saturn is looking at or aspecting reveal the actual skills you'll be using on the job. Let's throw out some examples to make this feel a little more real. If your Saturn is in Aries, you might be looking at a career in government, the military, or even construction. If it's in Gemini, that points toward media, communications, or business. Saturn in Libra, think fine arts, finance, maybe even fashion. And in Sagittarius, you see professions like banking, education, or social services. The sign really does set the stage. But here's where it gets even more granular, and honestly, kind of cool. Look at what happens when other planets join Saturn. If Jupiter is there too, it strongly suggests a role in teaching or preaching. If the powerful Sun is with Saturn, that can indicate a really high-ranking position or a big business venture. And if the mystical planet Ketu is there, well, that could point to a career as an astrologer or maybe someone working with really complex machines or chemicals.
Okay, so we've got Jupiter as the self and Saturn as the path or the career. But the real magic of Nadi astrology, the thing that makes it so powerful, is what happens when you look at how these two planets interact. Their relationship basically builds the core story of your life.
This is probably the best way to visualize it. Just imagine your life is a giant map. Jupiter is that little red "you are here" pin. Saturn's location, relative to that pin, describes the entire landscape around you, your circumstances, your challenges, your opportunities. That relationship is everything. And the difference in that positioning can be, well, it's just dramatic. Take a look at this. If Saturn is right there with Jupiter in the same house, it often points to a really tough early life. But it also suggests a huge developmental leap after age 28, often leading to becoming a researcher or a public figure. Now, if Saturn is directly opposite Jupiter in the 7th house, the story changes. That might mean a problematic childhood and maybe a career in a lower-paid public-facing role. See? Same planets, completely different life stories, all based on their relationship.
Here's another powerful contrast to really drive the point home. Let's say Saturn is in the 2nd house from Jupiter. That's the house of money and resources. This can mean the person earns a lot of cash, but also spends it just as fast and maybe struggles with happiness at home. But move Saturn over to the 11th house from Jupiter, the house of gains and friendships, and you get a different script.
Struggles are often overcome around age 28 or 29, money starts to pile up, and the person often becomes quite charitable later in life. Okay, so we've got the what of the life story. We understand the personality and the career path, but what about the when? When do all these big events actually happen? This is where Nadi astrology becomes this kind of cosmic clock, using the movements of our two-star players to time everything. So, Jupiter sets the broad chapters of your life. See, it takes about 12 years for Jupiter to travel through the whole zodiac, so life gets broken down into these 12-year cycles. Your first cycle, from birth to age 12, is all about events connected to you, the self. The second cycle, from 12 to 24, shifts focus to family, maybe your first job and relationships. Then the third, from 24 to 36, brings in themes of travel and personal effort, and on it goes.
But here's the kicker. Jupiter sets the general theme for the 12-year chapter you're in, but it's the slow, deliberate movement of Saturn that acts as the trigger. Think of Jupiter as setting the stage, but Saturn is the one that walks out and starts the scene. When Saturn, in its transit, makes contact with a planet in your birth chart, boom, an event is activated. And this creates a really clear cause and effect system. So when transiting Saturn comes along and makes contact with the Rahu in your birth chart, it can trigger the start of a whole new career. When it hits your Venus, that can signal the beginning of your profession, or, for men, meeting a life partner. Contact with the Sun can bring a promotion. Contact with Mars can trigger buying or building a house. And hitting K2, that often signifies an ending, like retirement or a major career change.
What gives Saturn all this power is its pace. It moves so slowly. It takes about 30 years for it to make just one full trip through the zodiac. And it's that slow, steady, deliberate movement that's really why it's seen as the karmic taskmaster, delivering the results and lessons of our actions over the long arc of a lifetime.
You know, when you boil it all down, this quote from the source material really just nails it. While Jupiter lays the foundation of who you are, this system puts this immense predictive power on one simple act: just watching the movements of transiting Saturn to see the story of a life unfold.
So it leaves us with this pretty profound thought. This ancient system suggests that the incredibly complex story of a human life, with all of its joys, sorrows, twists, and turns, might just be understood through the simple, elegant dance between two planets: Jupiter, the soul, and Saturn, the path that soul must walk. It makes you wonder, if your life is a story, could these two planets really be its primary authors?